Hey there, welcome back to Broken Arrow. Today looking at the Stryker Cavalry Regiment. Please be advised this is an early build of the game, and as such you might see some different stats, some different units, some different changes made between now and the release in June. What sort of spec is the Stryker Cavalry Regiment? Well, as you can see, it relies a bit more on support than on any of the other categories. Noteworthy, you have no helicopters. I think this is, well, dangerous, because helicopters can not only, of course, be used to do flanking attacks, to quickly solve tank issues you might have, but also to transport troops across the battlefield pretty quick. The Stryker Cavalry Regiment, well, I'm going to call them just the Strykers, they do that with their wheeled vehicles, of course, and as such they might need as many helicopters, but I always like to have some. It's just a very flexible device to have in your toolkit. So that kind of rules out using armored as their pair, because they don't get any helicopters either. You do get a lot of support units, so you can almost be a support player if you play this particular combination. But you're also going to be getting a nice mix of infantry and fast vehicles from the Strykers, as well as some armored vehicles from the Armored Brigade. So I think this is, in the rounding version, pretty good. But that lack of helicopters, I don't like it. The Marines, pretty well rounded. I'd say they have a bit of everything. The Airborne, it is going to fix your lack of helicopters. You will, however, have very few vehicles. That's not necessarily breaking the bank, because you still have the option to turn your Strykers, your infantry transports that is, into some pretty potent devices. And you will have a lot of air power. The final option is to go with Special Forces. In that case, you do get an okay amount of helos, you get some really nice infantry and recon, and I'd say you're pretty heavily infantry focused with this. You're going to have very few, if any, tanks. And this is kind of where it comes down to you as to what you want to decide. How do you want to combine these? Do you want to be potentially more of a flank player? Then I'd say this could be it. Special Forces plus Stryker. If you want to be a very flexible, fast deck, providing some more air support, combine it with airborne infantry. If you want to have something that's a bit more well-rounded, but lacking helicopters, the armor is going to be your friend. And if you want to have a very well-rounded deck, which includes helicopters and a bit of everything, the Marines. In this case, let's have a deck that's going to be operating kind of behind the flanks, or rather on the flanks slash behind enemy lines. You can definitely hold a line with your infantry. It's just not going to be as easy to push a line. So let's build that. Now, what do we have? We have lots of different units. You might have already seen some of those in the previous video about the about the Special Forces. Now, regarding recon, you have quite a lot of options here. Most of your infantry is going to come out of the Special Forces group. You do have some units of your own as part of the Strykers. So, for example, you got the Armored Knight, which is really a very fast recon vehicle, but please don't get it hit, because it doesn't have the armor to take anything. It's only coming equipped with a Browning, and that is it. But for 65 points, they're pretty cheap. They're cheap, they're more mobile than infantry, but they're also a bit more easily to detect than infantry. The Guardian, kind of similar, although their recon stat is far worse. You're looking at 1750 as opposed to 2400. The rest of the stats are pretty similar, and for some reason, sometimes the customizations bug out. You can upgrade them with a grenade launcher or both, and that's going to make them pretty effective at neutralizing infantry quickly. I just think that you have some better options to do that. Your Strykers are more heavily armored, and if you can tandem those with, for example, a recon group, why would you need this thing? It doesn't come with a laser designator either, it does come with smoke. I don't really see the role of this vehicle. The ATV, pretty similar options, but this thing can hit a bit harder with a javelin. And, interestingly, they come with a sniper rifle. So with that, you can start sniping infantry out of a building, so long as they're not sporting an ATGM, at about 1200 meter range. You will be able to spot things. You're not really breaking the bank with this thing. It's only 80 points, depending on how you spec it out. You can make them even cheaper, and you get quite a lot of them. You can up armor them, which means their armor goes from 30 to 130, that is against heat rounds. But beyond that, like a regular tank round, maybe some autocannon fire, and this thing is toast. I can, however, see a role for these things. If you have, for example, a group of 3, you're going to have a group of very mobile snipers. And potentially a very mobile group of snipers, grenade launchers, and javelin launchers. So a sort of hit and run force. But keep in mind, the more that you spec these out, the more expensive they'll become. How would I build this group out? Well, I try to typically go with the units that I think are going to be most useful first. So the units that I might open with, which in this case for me would be scouts. I'm going to give the scouts also a transport, because the Stryker RV is pretty decent. It has a lot of reconnaissance. You are once again suffering from a lack of armor, so if you up armor that, you can definitely do some work with that. It is still not going to beat a tank, but it should keep you alive a little longer, especially as you also have an APS. So you're able to shoot down a missile as it comes at you. Weapon package, again, you can load these things out with a javelin, but you can even put a Bushmaster on there. And all of a sudden, this thing has teeth. A lot of it. It is, however, very expensive. It's 175 points. That's some price tag that, depending on how you spec it out, you can get a tank for. So, it's a very mobile recon vehicle, and for the particular playstyle that I have in mind with this one, which is sort of flanker slash harasser, yeah, this thing can work. Keep in mind, the more armor you put on there, the more you're losing your speed. This is going to be a trade-off. You're doing 100 now. With APS and trophy, you're going back to 80. So bear that in mind as you're going to be looking at the type of speed and the type of advance you're wanting to get. Next up, what do I want to get? Well, behind enemy lines, I'm going to use snipers. I want to see what the enemy is up to. That means I don't care about their loadout. Yes, anti-material is nice, and it does give you a couple of shots from an anti-tank weapon, which can immediately make these things very lethal to artillery. But I kind of don't want the enemy to know that I'm there. So I'm going to keep these guys cheap, and I'm going to make sure that they're going to stay concealed. I don't really need a vehicle with them. Next up is going to be probably the Rangers, because these are going to be just frontline recon troops. The Rangers, I picked these because they're a bit more numerous. They're 6 guys versus 6, but these are, I'd say, very specialized. Unless you give them the special tactics team. In which case, they do line up very nicely with the specialization that I have in mind for this deck. Harassing behind enemy lines. And if the enemy has potentially a couple of helicopters that you might have done some damage to, then having the ability to finish them off with a stinger could be very nice. Keep in mind though, you're going to be giving your position away. Once you have shot down a helicopter, the enemy knows that there is something behind their lines, which means they might come out and try and hunt you down. That could, however, relieve pressure on the rest of the front line, allowing your teammates to do a bit more work. I'm going to bring these guys in the Silent Hawk, not necessarily because I want one of these birds, but it's going to also allow the transportation of other units in the Silent Hawk, because this thing can seat 12. And that means that they can also seat your regular infantry. The Rangers RRC, available in either standoff or close quarters mode. I think I have enough recon infantry, because I can use standard scouts in potentially the Stryker or the Silent Hawk at the opener. I can start using Rangers and, well, the snipers in this case, and the STT behind enemy lines. So, in order to fill out a few gaps that I might still have, which is a quick response, I'm going to say I want to have a Reaper, a Predator, or a Sentinel. I don't really care for the Shadow that much, because it doesn't have the ability to do any damage. The Sentinel doesn't have that either, but at least it's a lot faster. It has a forward speed of 300 over 110, so this thing will get there. And it's pretty stealthy. 175 over 125 and over 125 for the others as well. So this is a fast recon unit, but it can't really do much. And over here we have a recon unit which is not as fast, but if you have some part of your flank that is falling, or if you want to try and conceal that you might be trying to quickly reinforce a flank, this can help. It'll spot for itself, it'll rain down hellfires, and if you have a helicopter coming into range, it's going to shoot that with a Sidewinder as well. That's why I typically pick 1, potentially 2 Reapers. The Predator, of course, is also a very viable option. You also get stingers there. You get more stingers if you wish to. That does make it a rather specialized tool, because this is only going to give it the ability to go after helicopters. Maybe that is exactly what you want, but in this case, I don't really like it that much. Now, we still got about 500 points left here. I can get a second Reaper, And that gives me a couple 100 points. I think the Green Beret Flash are, or rather the Green Berets in general, are too good to overlook, especially with that grenade launcher. So let's get a couple of these guys. You could, by the way, make the case, well, why are you not pulling these out of infantry? Because you typically have infantry with a grenade launcher. Yes, you do. The problem is their reconnaissance range. You got a range of 1200. And for recon, that is quite different, because the Green Berets can see quite a lot farther. And they still have that capability. So I'm going to say I want to have these things, and I want to have the ability to call them in, or, well, not strictly them, of course, but bring them in one of those flyers. It's a nice, cheap unit. You can also opt for a little bird. So actually, let's do that, because this thing is pretty fast. It is pretty stealthy, 175. The Hawk, however, gets a 2.5, but it's more expensive. So if you need something dropped off quickly, only 6 guys, this thing might be able to do it. Just pull it back, or drop off snipers on the flanks and run away. They don't fight, they're just there as a battle taxi. Now that leaves me with another 160 points, so let's go with... Alright, I'm just going to max out the Green Berets. As you might have noticed, I did not bring any vehicle-based recon. It doesn't line up with my playstyle, but if you want to, you can get any of those Guardians, or up the amount of Stryker RVs that you get. Next up, infantry. What are we going to be getting? This is where you're going to see quite a lot of the capabilities of the Strykers. Because the Strykers can be fitted out however you see fit. And if I'm going to go for a quick harassment deck, I might want to do something that has a bit of firepower. And ideally firepower with a anti-missile, or rather an anti-tank capability. If you don't up-armor these, they're fast. They're going to be capable of doing 50 off-road and 100 on-road. And of course, reversing is not going to be as good with most of these vehicles. But hey, we're just there to shoot, then we're going to turn around and race back in the other direction. For this, however, you don't have that many vehicles, or sorry, you don't have that many infantry units that you can attach them to. You have the combat engineers. That's something you can attach one of these Strykers to. And I normally don't really bring in combat engineers because they're rather specialized, or at least they can be. But in this case, they got the small, they got the machine guns, they have a grenade launcher, and they got a shotgun. But more importantly, they allow me a Stryker slot. So I'm going to say I want to have... Why can I not adjust that Stryker? There. See, this is what I mean. Sometimes the customization options bug out in this build. For this one, I want to have a cheap transport. So this gives me the Stryker with a machine gun. Nothing more, nothing less. Because this way I have a 9-seater that I can quickly deploy. It's going to allow me to bring in units pretty quick and cheaply. This is going to be my frontline battle taxi. Let's get 2 combat engineers. You also get, of course, access to the special forces. So in this case, Delta Force. The War Pig is their transport of choice. And those, normally I wouldn't really put a whole lot of faith in. But they're fast, and you can get them with a tow too. So... given our harassment playstyle, that might work. That might allow you to quickly drop a couple of tanks, or at least get some tank eliminated, and then rush back for only 60 points, which you are putting at risk. It is also airdroppable, so if you are going to combine this with, for example, a drop from a KC-130, you can put these things somewhere behind enemy lines, where they're going to be extremely annoying for the enemy to deal with. Drop a couple of War Pigs, drop a couple of STTs or some other NTR options, and you're going to have a very annoying enemy group behind enemy lines. Anyway, what are we going to get? I'm going to go for my frontliners first, so the actual units that might be holding the line, which means troopers. And these troopers are capable of doing pretty much everything. They got short-range anti-tank, they got medium-range anti-tank, they have machine guns, they have grenade launchers, 9-man squads, they're tough. I'm going to bring quite a few of those. And as for their transport, are you going to bug out on me again? You're going to bug out on me again. There. For their transport of choice, I'm going to say I want to have these things up-armored, because they will get to the front line. And in order to support my infantry, I'm going to make them as tough as possible. Yes, you'll still not suffer, or you'll still not be able to really take on a tank. But at least you'll be able to drop off your infantry somewhat closer to the front line, which means that you can get to positions potentially somewhat safer. Loadout, up to you. I'd say if I'm going to drop infantry in an urban environment, I don't really need a Javelin, but a Mark 19 grenade launcher is nice, so you could pick this one. You can also get the Dragoon, which gives you the Bushmaster 2. And that is something I am quite interested in. Because it gives you a pretty nice effective range. It can suppress infantry inside another building. And with that staying power that it has, and APS, you might still be able to get these things back into cover. So let's get a couple of those. Let's say 4 troopers and 2 of those transports, hoping that they typically survive. As for the rest, troopers AA, also airdroppable, so you can also make these get dropped behind enemy lines. That does mean that these could be an interesting option to drop as well. I do, however, have that role in mind for the STT, which is going to not only give me the anti-air capability, but also the recon the recon ability that they have. So I can see behind enemy lines, and with that, get potentially shots on enemy high-value units. If I drop these boys, that's not necessarily going to work out, because they don't have as much optics as the other guys do. I would, however, want to have some of these in the front line. So I'm going to say I want to have 2 of them. I'm going to bring them in on foot. I don't really need a transport, because I got these and I got these. So I'm going to attach these on foot. Regarding Ranger Stingers, an interesting option again. You got a 6-man squad, but again, they're pretty similar to the other version, the STT. Their optics are the same as you have found on the troopers, but they do have 2 pretty hefty machine guns. And if you wish to, you can also turn them into javelins. I'm going to do that, because I want to have some standoff ability on my front line. And I know that I keep going back and forth between this is a flank deck and a frontline deck, but I typically have at least some presence around a cap, and then I can start flanking. If I'm going to keep that cap, I'm going to have at least some units capable of scaring off tanks. And that's something that this javelin can do. It's a top attacker, so with that you're able to very quickly eliminate a tank. That is, if it doesn't have APS. And the Stinger loadout, well, I have quite a few anti-air options, which we will get to in a minute. As you can see, I still have tons of points. I think Delta is too good to overlook. You can go with these guys on basically anti-infantry roll, which gives them 3 grenade launchers, or a bit more standoffish, which gives them an anti-tank weapon. If you're going to go close quarters, you will most likely win most fights against infantry, but you will need to bring somebody with these in order to deal with vehicles. I'm going to bring 2. I'm going to also bring the Warpig in their configuration as Bunker Buster. And I now need something that's capable of dealing with tanks. So I'm going to give these guys the anti-tank rockets. That's the Rangers. And the Rangers are going to deal with vehicles, while the Delta Force are going to deal with infantry. Let's get a couple of Rangers with grenade launchers to keep enemy infantry units at bay. I don't really need vehicles for all of these guys. I'm going to say I want to have the Warpigs. Yeah, let's attach the Warpigs to the Rangers and put these guys on foot. Now I still have 500 points left. You can see you can get a lot of infantry. I might have another Delta Force squad behind enemy lines, but I don't really expect to hunt infantry behind enemy lines. I expect to hunt vehicles, making Delta less likely. The Rangers with the Carl Gustaf M3 or 4 can also work, because they're not only going to be capable of knocking out vehicles, you can also target helicopters with them. And while, yes, we do have the Troopers AA, which can do the same thing with their Stingers, it's nice to have this double role, because it allows you to be a bit more flexible. The problem is, you don't really have enough slots. So, the only thing right now I can do is just increase the number of troops that I have on most categories, and try and fill out the role with that. Let's say I'm going to go with Delta. Already got 3 for 3 Delta. More grenade launchers then. Alright, vehicles, what do we get? Well, not much. We got the Booker. That's the guy from the Stryker team. Well, actually, they're all Strikers, for that matter. I want to have some vehicle capable of holding the front line. The problem with the Booker is it is expensive. Especially as you start putting more gear onto it. You're going to be looking at 195 points. It does have an okay amount of armor. You're not a proper tank, I'd say. You're not a proper tank. Yes, you will get some damage in. You have APS, you have smoke. Your mobility is alright. You got some okay optics on there. You're not really an Abrams, so try and not treat it as such. The battleship is, yeah, interesting. The battleship is capable of going in with machine guns, grenade launchers, whatever you want to put on them. You can put this thing as a grenade launcher slash tow vehicle. And I don't mean a tow truck, but I mean a tow launching truck. This thing gets 2 launchers. The interesting thing about it is that it might actually be pretty cost effective. Because with this truck, you're doing a lot of speed. You're doing 100. Just don't get hit while you're launching a couple of tow missiles at the enemy. And therein lies the rub. Because you might want to get those tow missiles away. But the problem is, the moment somebody shoots you, you're going to potentially die and you'll lose track of those missiles. And they're semi-active. So you're going to have to keep eyes on target, and you're going to have to keep leading the target. I haven't actually played with these things yet, but I'm interested in seeing how they perform. So I'm going to add just 1. Stryker HGM. It is exactly what it says on the tin. It is either a TOW 2A or TOW 2B missile launcher. And it can have, again, quite a lot of armor. But keep in mind, this thing is airdroppable. The more armor you put on there, the less airdroppable it becomes. So only the default version can be airdropped. Weapon package, either TOW 2A, so direct attack, or a top attack with the TOW 2B. What I like about this thing is that you can airdrop this behind enemy lines, and you cannot do that with the battleship. It has an okay amount of armor. It's better capable of holding its own against other units. And it also comes equipped with a machine gun, which, yes, the battleship can also have. So for a harassing role, this might be more interesting. I typically find that HGM carriers just die. For me, they're not great, because I struggle with finding line of sight. So I don't really want to use these, but I do want to use the next option. The Stryker MGS, the mobile gun system. You're going to have access to a grenade launcher, which is installed right there next to the turret. And again, you can airdrop these, or you can turn them into something that's a bit more durable, but not airdroppable. I am not quite convinced I want to have them in the airdrop version, but for this particular deck, that is what I'll take them in, because with that, I'm going to be able to get a flank on the enemy with a couple of these fast movers, and especially as you tandem those with potentially a, where is it, the Stryker, here, the Stryker Shorat, you can get some Stinger pods, and that means you can drop one of these, you can drop 1 or 2 of the Stryker MGS, and you're going to just roll up a flank from the side, or even hunt down high-value units behind enemy lines, while still being able to defend yourself against their potential response, which is helicopters. So, I'd say for the playstyle that I have in mind with this particular deck, with this, this set of units, I think the Stryker MGS is going to be my best option. Moving on to support. This is the Murder Helmet. This thing is something I haven't tested yet, but I'm eager to do. It's just a PIVADS, sorry, it's a CWIS mounted on a truck. That's all it is. What does it target? Everything. It targets infantry, it can target vehicles, just don't really expect it to do a whole lot against a tank. It can target helicopters, missiles, and aircraft only at a range of about 1,000 to 1,200. So you're not really going to get a whole lot of range out of it. But I think they're very interesting, and I just want to test them. You cannot airdrop them. You can give them a radar, which means that their high altitude range is going to go by ×2. So you're going to be targeting things at 2,400 meter range, especially goes for planes. You can give them a bit of armor for only 10 points. And seeing as it doesn't impact their mobility, I don't know, this might protect them from small arms fire a little better. Typically, however, I have my logistics units up first. So I'm going to say I want to have 2 HEMETs. You can turn these into some armored troop transports, which means that they're going to have a bit more armor. They can, however, only transport half. I don't really mind. I don't typically transport 9,000 points of heavy lift in one go. So an armored troop transport, in order to make it a bit more durable, works. As a self-defense weapon, I typically don't bother. Like, if these things go, they go. Fine, I'll get another. You can also get these things. They transport no people, but they transport a lot more heavy lift. And they're also still as fast. This one is a bit more versatile, but you're potentially putting a lot of your infantry inside one truck. So if you want to have something that's a little cheaper, that might not even need any up-armoring. Actually, let's go with this one. You only get 2 of these, however, as you get more HEMETs. So that's my supports, or rather my supply vehicles. I'm also going to add some helicopter for supplies, so that's going to shore up that capacity. Let's go to anti-air. We have access to the MML Stinger, or rather the Stinger currently, because I can also load it out with Hellfires or Sidewinders. This is going to be a predominant anti-air unit, and especially Fire and Forget is something that I'm always interested in for my missiles, because it means less micro for me. This missile is going to give you about 2,000 meter range, can target helicopters and can target aircraft. The aircraft are only 1,500 meters out. The Sidewinders give you slightly more and can be used with radars. The Stingers, I'm not even sure why you'd want a Stinger with radar, because I don't think it needs it. I wonder if you're going to get more range from this targeting an aircraft if you turn your radar on. Because it's not like the Stinger's only going to have more range. Anyway, I don't really know when you'd want to equip with these Hellfires. You're going to have a truck that you might get like 30 millimeters of armor on. But you can throw Hellfires out. You're targeting vehicles, targeting helicopters as well. And their top attack. I don't know when you'd really use this. Because it's an ATGM vehicle. Well, at least it is now. But that's not really what I need. I need something that can deal with aircraft without being too much of a hassle. I want to have as much range as possible. I'm going to say 1,550. The damage is 13. The damage with these is only 8. So let's get these instead. You get 1,500 points for support, so that's a nice amount of points that you can spend. Next anti-air is going to be potentially the Patriots or the Stryker SHORAD. I'm going to pick the Stryker SHORAD first, because I need this thing in my deck in order to make it work with that role that I have in mind. Flanking and being annoying. So for that role, I want to have 2 of them. You can load them out with double Stinger pods, you can load them out with rocket pods, you can load them out with medium machine guns and Stingers. Keep in mind, if you go the route of double Stingers, you're still going to get 30mm guns. But over here, you're only getting Stingers and medium machine guns, sorry, heavy machine guns. I want this, because this also allows me to support units which might be dealing with infantry. And as such, I can use that high explosive dual purpose to go after them. The Stingers, you get 2 of them, and that gives you 16 missiles. So you don't have to worry about these things running out. If you pick this, I think you're only gonna get half. But then again, your price also drops by 50 points. I will not give them any additional armor because I want them to survive. Oh, sorry, that makes no sense. Because I want them to be airdropped. That's the most important thing. Long range air defense, you can either pick the Patriot Pack 3 or the Patriot Pack 3 MSE. The MSE has some slightly better range. The thing with the Patriot Pack 3 is you can load it out with 16 missiles. The Patriot Pack 3 MSE can only load up with 12. If you're going to max out these things regarding the amount of missiles, you're going to get the same amount of points. So this one costs 300, this one costs 300. I don't really think there's any really discernible difference. Most of the time, maybe if you pick 16 missiles, you won't have to reload at all if the enemy doesn't use a ton of anti-air, a ton of air power. With these things, you might, but given the fact that you have slightly more blast radius, maybe you don't need to have as many shots fired. I think the difference between these two is not really big enough in this configuration. If you want to have something cheap, however, you can get the Patriot Pack 3 with only 4 missiles. And then you're going to have to babysit them a bit more. You're going to have to put potentially one of those resuppliers next to it to make sure it keeps going. That is, however, a pretty cheap anti-air option. So maybe for early game, if you want to go with 2 Patriots, that is, for early game you're going to get this one, later game you're going to get that one, and that does fill up 2 slots, which I do not really like. I'm going to go a bit more middle ground and say I want to have something for 250 points with the better missile, and I will typically only take 1. Then, the Stryker SPH. This is capable of delivering some death at range. I think you always want to have some capability in that role, just to make sure that you can hammer high-value targets if you see them. And as it's still a Stryker chassis, it is fast. So you can do some shooting and scooting, and potentially follow your scout units a bit farther behind, do some damage with this thing, and be gone before they have a chance to retaliate. That's maxing out 1130 out of 1500. I still want that CRAM as a test. So actually, seeing as I typically put my units side by side, I'm going to do it like that. This is the test unit. You can also get these Stryker MCs. That is the mortar carrier. You can load them out with mostly HE, smoke, or guided rounds. And you can also drop these, because again, it's a Stryker. So given that little bit of capability, you can also drop these things behind enemy lines. I'm not really sure if I would want to, because I think they're not really going to contribute as much as I need. But for the front line, they might. Alternatively, you can get a HIMARS, which is of course going to give you a lot of range, especially if you equip them with different types of missiles, such as the PRSM, which is a ballistic missile at 8,000 meter range. I think given what I'm doing with this deck, this works best. Because now I have some, let's say, medium range fire support, and I have long range fire support. So that if my snipers start spotting anything, or my Reaper drone, or my STT, I can then engage it with the HIMARS. That is, if I cannot get to it with an aircraft. Helicopters. Not a whole lot of things that you're going to find from the Strykers, because they don't get any helicopters. So we can load these out as we see fit. If I'm going to be harassing things behind enemy lines, I want to have Comanches. Because they're sneaky. They get a 2.5 stealth value, and that's as high as you can get on any of these helos in this deck. So I want the Comanche, and I want to have these things be a very multi-role tool. I'm going to give them Stingers, I'm going to give them Hellfires, and I'm going to give them more Hellfires. So I get 2 Stingers, 4 Hellfires. Actually, let's give them 4 Stingers. 4 Stingers, 2 Hellfires. Why? Because if this thing is flanking, I might be able to target a high-value unit, such as artillery, with a Hellfire, and then very quickly be gone. If I'm going to get chased, I will shoot back with a Stinger. So if there's a helicopter around, I will shoot back with a Stinger. Keep in mind, these things are fairly expensive at 260, but I think you can very quickly recoup that cost by doing some damage to high-value units. I also need the ability to transport some things to the front line. Now, the DAPs... the DAP is your direct attack unit. The SOAR can do that. You can drop 4,000 points of supplies and or 12 people. And given that I want to be flanking and annoying, that's what I'm going to do. I don't care about their loadout. Yes, you can give them miniguns or heavy machine guns. I don't care for that. The SOAR over here, the Chinook, a very, very big unit. It can transport 32. If you wish to get a lot of troops into a particular position, you can use this. But keep in mind, lots of troops, one helicopter gets shot down, lots of troops dead. Not really what I have in mind. So I'm not going to use this thing. As for the Apache Guardian, this is going to be a bit more staying power. It has very nice optics at 2400. You're going to load these out as you see fit. You can use them in a more frontline role, which in case I'd say give them Hydras. You can turn this into a big Hydra gunship. Giving you 76 Hydras, which is nice, but it doesn't really do anything against other units such as helicopters and or tanks. In my mind, Apaches are typically tank killers, so I'm going to give them the Fire and Forget anti-tank missiles. Sorry, not anti-tank strictly. This is going to target helicopters. Oh, which is... Oh, come on. Here. This is going to target tanks and vehicles as such. The Hydras... Maybe. You can also turn them into daggers, which will also be allowed to target laser-guided units as well as infantry, so it's a bit more multi-role. And target lighter vehicles, so I don't have to spend my Jagams on that. And as for these, you can either make your helicopter more survivable with the ECM or load it out with Stingers. Stingers are only going to give you double launcher, that is, 4 missiles. So you can pretty quickly deal with an enemy helicopter. Right now, I don't really have a whole lot of capacity to deal with enemy helicopters, beyond, of course, the capabilities that I have from the Recon, from the STT, the Centurion CRAM, the Stryker SHORAD. I have some options there, yes, but the Apache is going to allow me to do that quickly. I also have the Comanche to do that, so in that sense they might not need them. This is something I might change later. Now it gives me another 250 points. Let's say I can get an Osprey. An Osprey is something that's very quick, so I can take a bit more offensive action along long flanks. And some maps, well, you want to have an Osprey there because it's just a lot faster. Then, air power. one of the most important things is that we're going to have some fighter up. I'm going to immediately pick the Raptor. The Raptor is going to always come with a couple of AMRAAMs. I mean, if I equip it with Stormbreakers, you're going to always have 2 AMRAAMs and 2 Sidewire. And that's just default loadout. I want to have these things just be my sheer air-to-air units. And in order to do that, I'm going to load them out with more anti-air options, or rather air-to-air options. So we've got the AMRAAMs, we've got 4 of those. We've got 2 JATMs, the AIM 260. These are not as fast, but you will see that they got more range. So we've got 1,000 to 7,000, and we got 2,000 to 9,000, which might give me the first hit on an enemy unit. I might actually pick 2 of these, just to try and keep the enemy air off my back. I also want to have the ability to airdrop things. The only aircraft that we get is the MC-130. With that, I'm going to be dropping off my Stryker. So I want to have 2 of those. I want to be annoying, I want to be in with flanks. Next, I want to have a unit that can hit behind enemy lines once I have spotted things. And I'm thinking that the Nighthawk is going to be the likely option with that. You can load them out with the cruise missiles, which gives you 10,000 meter range. In this case, if I'm going to be thinking behind enemy lines, I might fly these things along the flanks and then get a missile off. So let's say 2 Nighthawks for that. Or rather maybe 1, because I don't have that many points left. Yes, the B-2 Spirit's also here. You can load these out with quite a few different options, including 16 cruise missiles. You're going to be paying 800 for that 1 bird. Is that what you want? That's going to be entirely up to you and your playstyle. The F-16s gives you some very different options. You can have these things potentially fly low, because if you load them out with a bunch of Snake Eyes, which are retarded bombs or high drag bombs, they're going to be slowing down and allowing your plane to escape. You can drop these things while flying at low altitude. So that means less likely to get shot down by enemy air. It is, however, at 270 points, a fairly expensive option for just being a bomb delivery vehicle. You can increase its survivability, but only giving it 10% ECM, so it's not spectacular. The F-16 CJ, this is a harm option, so a seed bird. You can also do the same thing with the F-35 if you load that out with harm. I'd say if you have the option, I would pick the F-35A, because I'm also getting 20% built-in ECM. The Viper only gets 5% unless you add another ECM pod, but you're not getting the stealth value. You're getting a stealth value of 1, over here I'm getting a stealth of 175. I don't want the enemy units knowing that I'm coming in with anti-radiation missiles. They will probably see this thing at some point, so be it. This thing, however, is a bit more stealthy. And if I want to have the ability to fly in my units airdroppable, I want to have at least 1 seed bird in there. The F-16V Viper, very flexible aircraft. You can get quite a few different loadouts on that. You can even get them with additional fuel tanks, so you can increase their time over target. I don't really see aircraft surviving long enough to get time over target, or at least enough. And I don't have that many points left. I got about 400. I might be able to get 2 Ghost Riders / Spookies. This is the Spooky loadout with the Bofors. This is the Ghost Rider, which just gets the Bushmaster. I'm going to go with the Spooky, which sacrifices the Bushmaster in favor of the Bofors. I think they changed that since last time. Hellfire, and I don't typically use Griffins a whole lot, so let's forgo those. Can I get them? No, I'm over budget here. That's unfortunate. I got 45 points left. I'm picking the Spooky, not so much because I can do behind the lines operations with it, but it can shore up some defense in case I or my teammates need that. Alright, so we got 45 points left. So where is that gonna go? I'm thinking I'm gonna have to up armor some unit, or at least make something a little bit more survivable. Can we do something about that battleship? No, that battleship already has the best. I can increase weaponry on the Soar over here, giving me 99.75. The Guardian is fine. The Osprey can get some better gun. There we go. One thing you might note about this deck is that it presently doesn't have a whole lot of logistics. I got 2 of these, and I have 2 of these, and and 2 Ospreys, but it's mostly air focused. That's because I have 4 options of NTR in the support and arty. If you want to have, for example, if you don't like testing the Centurion CRAM, such as I am, you can definitely replace these with another logistics vehicle. This is a way that you can build out the Strykers plus the Special Forces, and I think it's going to be an interesting deck to play. I'll try and get some video from that, because I'm looking forward to seeing how these guys actually perform in the field. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. The game is coming out in June, so prefer to highlight it or wishlist it on Steam, link down below. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are below, and I'll see you soon for more.